is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
We don't ever miss an opportunity to make sure our kids understand from day one that we're going to coach you really hard, but we're going to love you even harder. And so to do that, it's not necessarily words. It's let's show them what that means.
Brad Stamps is in his 7th season as the head boys basketball coach at his alma mater, Fayetteville High School in Arkansas. Brad's first job was coaching 8th grade basketball at Woodland Junior High, where he worked alongside his mentor and former Fayetteville High School head coach, Kyle Adams. Stamps later became the head coach at Shiloh Christian, where he took a program that had won only one game the year before he arrived and turned it into a 28-game winner and state semifinalist in his final season. Brad also served as the head coach at Springdale High School, where he won 2 conference championships in 6 years and led the team to a state runner-up finish in his 5th year. Stamps has also had several stints as an assistant coach and brings a unique perspective regarding the relationships, responsibilities, and skill sets needed to succeed as both a head coach and an assistant. Hey, Hoopheads, I wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Tom Heil, head men's basketball coach at Baldwin-Wallace University, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
Coaches, you've got a game plan for your team, but do you have one for your money? That's where Wealth for Coaches comes in. Each week, we'll deliver simple, no-fluff financial tips made just for coaches. Whether you're getting paid for camps, training sessions, or a full season, Wealth for Coaches helps you track it, save it, and grow it. It's time to stop guessing and start building. Subscribe now at wealthforcoaches.beehive.com/subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Wealth for Coaches for daily money wins. Your money needs a coach. Start with Wealth for Coaches. Please take some notes and get ready to learn and grow as you listen to this episode with Brad Stamps from Fayetteville High School in the state of Arkansas. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here tonight without my co-host Jason Sunkel, but I am pleased to welcome back to the Hoopheads pod for his 3rd appearance, Brad Stamps from Fayetteville, Arkansas and Fayetteville High School. Brad, welcome back to the Hoopheads pod, man. Great to see you again.
Great to see you, Mike. I appreciate you having me back on. Looking forward to this.
Thrilled to have Brad on. What we're going to talk about tonight, because obviously for those of you who are out there listening, the episode is going to take a little different flow than it normally does, where we get into our guest background and kind of talk about where they're at. And you can obviously go back and listen to Brad's first episode with us, where we talked about Brad's background and got into his whole story. But tonight, what we thought we would do is pick Brad's brain in terms of what it takes to run a great high school basketball program. With Brad's experience and the things that he's been able to do in his career, I think you're going to find a ton of things that are actionable from our conversation tonight that you can apply immediately if you're a high school coach, even if you're a college coach, taking some of the ideas and thoughts that Brad has to be able to make your program better. So, Brad, again, welcome. Looking forward to diving into this topic. And let's just kind of, before we dive into that, just kind of give us an update of, again, for maybe people who don't go back and listen to that entire episode, but maybe just kind of where you're at, how long you've been at Fayetteville, and just a quick 30-second recap of kind of where you are in your career.
Yeah, Mike, I'd love to do that. I'm in year 7 at my alma mater, Fayetteville High School, as a head coach. I was 4 as an assistant before that. And so this is year 17 for me as a head basketball coach. I spent 4 years at Shiloh Christian as a head coach, 6 years at Springdale High School, which is one of our rival schools. And then now I've been back, 11 years, but 7 as a head coach. And this is year 28, 29 overall, I think. And so, yeah, we're excited about where we're at. And, we've got unfinished business at Fayetteville High School. That's for sure.
All right. So that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of different issues, topics, things that a high school coach has to be concerned with when you're talking about building a great program. And I think we're going to start with putting together your staff, because clearly when you get a job, one of the first things that you have to do is figure out, okay, where is my staff coming from? Do I have any holdovers from the staff that was there previously? Do I have coaches that have been with me at my previous job? Do I have connections from coaches that I've coached against, coached with in the past? So let's start with just hiring a staff, and then we can get into the roles and responsibilities and how you kind of divvy that up in your program and what advice you might have for high school coaches out there.
No, you bet, Mike. It's, I believe, our structure, I think, is important to talk about before I talk about my staff and job responsibilities and those type of things. Our structure at Fayetteville High School, we're a 9 through 12 school. And so we have 3 basketball periods during the school day that my entire staff are in those periods. We have a freshman basketball team that's led by Coach Tyler McCullough. He's also, not only is he a freshman head coach, but he's also one of my varsity assistants. We also have a JV2 period during the school day led by Lance Fisher. And then in the afternoon period, we have our JV varsity athletic period, which is together. And I've got my associate head coach, Jordan Rose, who's been with me for quite a while now. And then Coach Spencer Brown, who is my JV head coach, but he's also my varsity assistant. And so every night in our varsity games on my bench, you'll see, the 4 of us on our bench. And, it's a great staff, and it truly is, a collective responsibility among all of us. Every major decision, Mike, that's made within our basketball program goes through a filter of all 4 of us. And we spend a lot of time, together, obviously, like most basketball staffs do, but we are constantly trying to push each other to the next level. We're trying to maybe debate, sometimes argue. But at the end of the day, Mike, I think the most important thing about that is, not only are we talking about them, but when we come out of a room or we come out of a session where we're heavily talking about something that's important, the structure of our program, the day-to-day operations, whatever it is we're a united front. And I think that's important. And I've always believed this, and that, you surround yourself with great people and then let those great people do their job. I'm blessed to have a staff that has unique skill sets. They have some of their strengths are my weaknesses, and I think that we mesh well together because of that. And so, that's kind of the way we do things. And then we obviously have, our our middle school coaches, which is we're vertically aligned with, our 2 junior highs and our middle schools all are lined up, to what we want and how we feel like is best to fit our kids' needs.
Obviously, that's key, right? To be able to have everybody working together. And we'll get into sort of how you synchronize that all the way down to the youth level in a minute. But let's stay focused with the staff. And one of the things that I hear you saying, and I think it's something that has been a theme of a lot of conversations that we've had here on the podcast with both high school and college coaches, is that delegation piece, right? And you talked about hiring guys or having guys that are on your staff that fill in for your weaknesses. They may have a strength or you have a weakness, or vice versa. But one of the things that I think is always interesting to hear coaches talk about is, how do you go about doing that delegation? Has it gotten easier to do that as you've become more experienced? Because one of the things that I hear from coaches, Brad, is that when I'm a young coach, right, I kind of want to have my hand in everything, right? And it's hard to give up to that control, especially when it's my first head coaching job. I want to make sure that I'm overseeing this and that I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then as guys get more experienced, they're able to kind of pull back and understand that, hey, if I put this over on my assistant's plate, now I know that's going to get done, and I can then focus on more of the overall picture of the program and leave maybe the details in that area to one person on my staff. So talk a little bit about just the evolution of being able to delegate for you. Was that something that came naturally to you early? Was it something that you become much better at as you've gone along? Just talk about that piece of it.
I would say early, no. I think, my first head coaching job at Shiloh Christian, I'm young, I'm green. And I felt like, I'm going into a situation where they were a football dominant program. They have never won in basketball. And my inner circle is telling me not to do this. My ego is telling me, yes, do this and prove people wrong. And so when you jump into that, many times it's, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to show people I can do this. And that's ego. That's all that is. And you learn, even though we had great success, you learn that, it's, you really run yourself ragged. You also, obviously in coaching, you're going to make sacrifices, but many times you misstep along the way. And what I learned is I don't have all the answers. And I started surrounding myself with really good assistant coaches at that point in time that I poured into, but they also, I trusted the fact that not only are they going to have the kids' best interest, but they're going to be loyal to me. They're also going to take some things off my plate, is what you mentioned. And it takes a while as a young coach. You want to go out and show everybody that you can do something that people think you can't, or you want to be successful. And that all that is ego getting in the way. And at some point in my life, I discovered that, like, you surround yourself with people, good, solid people, and then just let them do their job. And so for us now, as our staff has evolved, is I know 100% without a doubt that things are going to get done because of the people that I have in place. And we don't walk into a room day one with my staff and say, hey, this is what you're doing. I need you to do this because I'm weak in this. We get in a room and we write and I'll never forget it. And we've got I've got a degree in organizational management, and I study businesses, and I see, some of those things in leadership and how businesses fail, but also how they succeed. And I just truly believe this, that you empower the people around you. And not only do you share, with them, maybe what you admire about them, but, what they bring to the table. And those things are important. And so we write every single role and responsibility that it takes to run in our case, a 6A program, which is the top classification. And we write them all down the board. And we get input. We say, hey, what's important? What do we have to do? What are roles that, are necessary for us to be able to operate? And then, we specifically go around the room and I allow my assistants to choose, hey, I would be really good at this, or hey, let me do this, and hey, let me do that. And at the end of the day, you create this flow chart, I guess is the best way to say it, or an organizational chart of, okay, these are job responsibilities. This is a job description. So when we turn this into our admin, they look at it and they're like, oh, wow. Like, first of all, that's a lot of responsibilities. And sometimes I don't think people are aware of what it takes. And so, all those little detailed things, all the way down from scouting to film exchange to doing the laundry to all the bus requests and making sure we're doing the travel and all those things. Now we've got an organizational chart that guides us, that leads us. And there's overlap, obviously, between some of the job descriptions, but at the end of the day, we feel like we're covering everything we need to do based on each other's skill sets.
How many line items are there on that whiteboard as you guys are going through that? How many things are there?
Well, I'll tell you, we filled a board, and I think we got to 68 the first time we did this, and it's ever evolving because not only is the landscape around is changing. It's a lot different coaching in 2025 than it was in 1995. I promise you. And so, it's ever changing, and that's fine. And we're trying to be ahead of that. And, we're always trying to push the envelope and try to make our program, take it to the next level.
When you have guys who have been a part of your staff and you're going through that and they've done things in the past, like, hey, I've taken this, I've taken that. Do you go through and say, hey, I'm taking that again? Do you try to mix it up to help guys to grow? Or maybe, hey, why don't you take this new area? Or how do you approach the idea of somebody bringing their strengths, but also, again, I know one of the things that you and other head coaches love to do, right, is to develop your people to be able to help them to grow to eventually to the point where maybe if they want to have their own program, they can do that. So how do you approach that piece of it?
No, that's a great question. And yes, I want my assistant coaches, I want them to be where they're in the point of I want to be a head coach. And so I want to make sure that, I'm pushing them in those areas, but I'm also giving them opportunity. And, as far as our staff goes and the structure of every day, I have an offensive coordinator, which is my associate head coach, Jordan Rose, highly skilled in offense, studies offense, is constantly coming to me with different ideas, different ways. Our personnel from year to year obviously changes, but not only our personnel, but our style has changed. Obviously, our DNA and our backbone is always going to be, man-to-man defense and, transition offense. But as far as half court and some of the things we do, it changes. And so I trust him. I believe in him. He does an outstanding job with the offensive side of the ball. I also have a defensive coordinator. And when I say those, and that's Spencer Brown, my assistant coach, who's young, energetic, loves that side of the ball. And when I say we have an offensive coordinator and defense coordinator, that doesn't mean that I walk away from either side of the ball and I just throw it at them and say, hey, this is what you're doing. We're in conversations daily, every single day about, whether it's a practice plan or whether it's, an individual workout or whatever it is on those sides of the ball. So it's a collaboration. It's, a collective responsibility, like I said before, of all of us to make sure that every area is covered. And that's kind of the way we do things there.
That leads into the next piece of this, and we can approach it both from a coaching perspective, but also from a relationship with your player standpoint. When you talk about the relationships that are a part of your program, you have your staff in place. There's obviously a relationship that you're talking about with them, right? Just that daily communication about the program and whatever. But then you also have the relationship with the players. You have relationships with people within your school environment. You have relationships with people in your community. So just talk about how important it is to develop all of those relationships. And you can take the groups one at a time. You can just talk about your general philosophy, however you want to do it. But tell me a little bit about the relationships that are so important as a high school basketball coach.
No, Mike, it's number one for me. And when I, as an early coach and as a young coach, I think all of us, we set out to we want to be successful. We want to be successful. And maybe we gauge success on wins and losses and winning games or winning a state championship or winning that last game. And that's fine. But I think when you really, especially when you get older like I am and you've been in it for a while, your perspective maybe, I wouldn't say completely changes because winning's important. Like I won't take that away. And when you're at a place like Fayetteville High School where the expectations are high, winning is important. But I think the day-to-day relationships with kids keeps me in it, an old guy in it, because those are important. And, we've got a game coming up tomorrow night, and all of those guys that I talked about that were in that senior class last year coming to the game. And they're coming to the game because, one, they played in a program they're proud of, but two, the relationship. And, we don't ever miss an opportunity, I would say, to make sure our kids understand from day one that, we're going to coach you really hard, but we're going to love you even harder. And so to do that, it's not necessarily words. It's let's show them, what that means. And, we're trying to push, the envelope on those areas all the time. Last year we started a 5 H's with our players where on Sunday when we come in and watch film, we each individual at some point over a course of a season will get up in front of the group. The staff goes first. I went first last year. And really what you see in the 5-H's, for anybody that wants to know that, I think it's a powerful tool for all, not necessarily coaches, but for everybody. And we talk about those things, and those 5-H's are, get up and talk about in front of the group what your biggest heartache or heartbreak has been in your life to this point, who your heroes are and why. The history, give us a history of, your story, basically, your hopes, what those hopes are, for maybe high school career, but also after, and then your biggest highlight up to this point. And it's really powerful, Mike, when you start to see these young people get up in front of their group and even our staff of, them humbling themselves, their transparency, and just really letting your guard down. And I truly believe that builds chemistry. It builds a group that, we're going behind the scenes. We're finding out about each other's families, and we're all different. We come from different backgrounds. We come from all those things. And then we try as a staff, we try to get out and see these young people outside of basketball and whatever other activities they're in, whether they're in choir, whether they're in, other sports or other extracurriculars. We try to make sure that, we're always there, we're always present. And then just, the day-to-day interaction are what I'm after. And, whether it's a 2-minute conversation with a young man about life or a 5-minute, 30-minute, we have an open door policy where we tell our young people and we tell our parents at parent meeting, like, our door's always open and we want your young person to take advantage of that. And in those closed door sessions, it's free. It's, I would say it's safe. It's a place that we really can talk about tough things and have tough conversations. We don't avoid them. Whether it's playing time in season, whether it's, things that have gone on outside of the walls of the basketball gym and life. And, we don't take those for granted, and we truly believe in relationship building. It's an important topic for us, and that's something that we'll never back off on.
I think there's two things there that come through very clearly. One is the importance of those relationships. And then two, I think the balance of formal and informal development of those relationships, right? Because you have your 5-H's, which is obviously a formal setting in that it's something that you're doing intentionally to be able to give every player, every staff member an opportunity to get up and talk in front of the group. And obviously then for the group to be able to listen and internalize that so that, and you're building that bond. And then at the same time, you're talking about just the daily 1-minute check-in. Hey, how you doing? Hey, we're stretching and I'm walking through and having conversations, or you're in your classroom and somebody stops in and says hello. And those are the things that, again, they're not formally planned, but those are a big part of what you're trying to do too. And I think that when I've talked to so many different coaches about relationships, those are the two ways. People have obviously different ways of doing it in a formal setting, but so many guys have talked about that informal of you have to do that check-in with guys every day. You have to see them outside the basketball, outside the basketball court. You have to be able to take an interest in who they are as people and who their other interests are besides just the game of basketball. And when you do that, that's when you really start to see those relationships blossom. And then it goes to the second point of what you said there, which is that when you do that and you build those relationships, now you've made those deposits to be able to then coach your kids hard and get the most out of them so that they want to play for you. I think one of the things that you'll often see is a coach who maybe hasn't invested in that relationship side, hasn't invested in the person. And then when things get tough or you run into adversity, instead of everybody kind of banding together, that's when things sometimes break apart because the relationship isn't strong enough to fight through that adversity and those tough times and those tough conversations like you talked about. And so I think, again, it's obviously an ongoing process. It doesn't happen overnight, but if you're investing in it intentionally through whatever system that you want to invest in intentionally, and then you're also having the informal daily conversations and interactions. I think that's where the magic sauce is in the balance between those two.
No, Mike, I think you hit it. It goes beyond. I'll never say that X's and O's and scheme and all those things, aren't of major importance. I'll never say that, but I truly believe in 2025 more than any time before. We have to check the pulse, so to say, every single day of our athletes. There's so many things, whether it's social media, whether it's just the day to day. I'm sorry, whatever it is, we've got to check in on them, and the mental health and all those things are important because kids go through things, adults, we go through things, and we don't hide from those. And to be able to share, even as a staff, with whatever it is, if we're having a bad day or, we talk about that and we don't back away and we share those things because really, as I tell our players all the time that, one of our favorite parts of the day, so to speak, is, at 3:30 in the afternoon when our athletes are walking in the gym, they've been in class all day. As a staff, we've been in planning and we've been in our, planning for practice. And then we get there and we get to see each player walk into the gym. And, you can read a lot by the way they enter the gym. And I think those touches is what we call them, where, we have every kid's name on our practice plan. And we want to make sure as a staff that somebody within our staff is, and we check it off each day, that we're making sure that whether it's a comment, whether it's a high five, a pat on the back, whatever it is, we're touching every single player every day in some capacity. And I think that's important. And I think, to be honest, I think the psychology of it is way more important on a grand scale than X's and O's and scheme and all those things.
That daily connection with players, I think, goes a long way. And sometimes I think it's underrated, especially by people outside of the coaching profession who only watch a game on Friday night or Tuesday night, and they don't see all that behind the scenes stuff that you see every single day as a high school coach. And like you said, how important and in some ways vulnerable kids can be, right, to all the things that, again, sometimes as adults, we forget about what a 16, 17-year-old kid is going through on a daily basis. And then you throw in all the, as you said, social media and phones and things that old guys like us didn't have to deal with back in the day when we were student athletes. None of that stuff existed. And so I think it's really important to, again, as you said, to keep those things in mind as you're building relationships with your players. Talk a little bit about your relationships with the parents of players. And I know that that's a really hot button topic for high school coaches in particular, that parents have continued to be involved, let's just say, in their children's athletic careers. And sometimes that can present a challenge. So just talk to me about how you try to develop relationships with parents so that you end up on the same team and not being adversaries throughout the course of a season and throughout the course of a player's time in your program.
Yeah, for sure. And, those relationships, whether it's one-on-one or whatever it is, they start early because, our staff and our youth programs are tied together. And so most of these parents have seen us at their child's games from 3rd, 4th grade all the way through. And so when they get to us, we at least, seen each other. We've, in passing, have had conversations, whatever it is. And then, we structure parent meetings throughout the year. And in those parent meetings, we talk about a lot of things. And we share with them that, hey, we have one common, we share the same goal. We share the same interest, and that's to make sure that we're a partnership and pushing your child to be the best he can be. And, just back us, just support us, just make sure that, they understand that, we're not going to do anything to embarrass their child. We're not going to put their child in a situation that is unsafe, that, that they can be embarrassed by. We just don't believe in that. And so, just trying to get the word across that we're in it together. We share our expectations of what it's like. We want them coming to games. We want them coming to every event that we possibly could have. We do a preseason, tailgate for a football game, and all of our families are there. We cook burgers. A local bank cooks burgers. We do things like that prior to tipping it off on game one, to where we're all together outside of basketball, developing some of those trusting relationships, but also just getting to know each other. I think that's important. And then, when it's all said and done, it comes down to trust. Trust the fact that, we're going to do everything every single day to push your child to his limit, but also be there to encourage, support. And it goes way beyond just, coaching their son in basketball. It goes way beyond that. We want to be there for all kinds of things, way beyond when they're inside of our gym and those type of things too.
And I think those proactive messages that you're talking about, right? When you're doing that in the preseason, in the off season, you're building that relationship throughout the time that a kid is a part of your program. That then if you do ever get in a situation where you have to have a more difficult conversation with the parent beyond just, hey, what we're trying to do for your kid in a positive way. But when there are those issues of playing time or whatever may come up that can be a problem, if you've already built those relationships and there's some positivity to fall back on, it makes the more difficult conversation a little bit easier because the parent knows from where you're coming, right? That you've put the time in, not just to their kid as a basketball player, but as a human being. And it's much more difficult, I think, to be adversarial when you've already established a positive relationship and the parent has already seen some of the things that you're doing that have nothing to do with basketball, that just have to do with supporting their child as a human being. To me, I always think that that's the best way to go. If the first time, it's kind of like being a teacher, right? If the first time the parent hears from you is when the kid's acting up in class or they failed a test, that conversation is going to be pretty hard because we don't have any kind of rapport at all. I'm just calling you to say, hey, your kid's acting like a knucklehead in class. Okay. But if I've developed a relationship with you before and the parent has heard from me about something positive the kid's done in class, or again, in the basketball court, or just in life, it makes that much easier. It makes that conversation a lot easier.
No, it does. And I think maybe the general theme there is communication. Communication is such a big deal, and things get maybe misconstrued, or it can change when there's not communication. And so that communication is important. We send out, a weekly email. My staff does, where we outline the week ahead. Everything. We're real specific in those weekly emails. So they're hearing from us at least every week in a group. But then we also welcome, like if you have an issue, we always, tell these parents or our parents that, number one, have your child, if there's something going on, have your child approach us. We'll visit with the child. If that can't get solved, we welcome you. Come in and let's sit down and talk, because I think a lot of times problems get taken care of when you're in front of somebody and you're a listener and you're truly listening. It's not a burden, or it's not something that, oh no, I've got so-and-so coming in to sit down with us. It's let's listen. Let's actively listen to what's going on. And then let's, give a response based on, maybe some dialogue or some things that we actually know. And so I think that communication piece is so important, to constantly have that. And we're open. We like to visit, and, things can get taken care of in that realm.
Give with Hoops is the first platform turning basketball analytics into fundraising impact. Every stat tells a story, and now every story drives sponsorship, engagement, and team growth. Programs nationwide are transforming basketball stats into funding power. Learn to use performance data to attract sponsors, engage fans, and raise more with every play. Give with Hoops will help you raise 3 times more money for your program as their stat-based pledges consistently outperform traditional fundraisers. Visit givewithhoops.com/hoop-heads-podcast to learn more and take your fundraising to the next level. Give with Hoops. Let's talk about another relationship that is very important as a high school coach, and that's your relationships with your administration. So your AD, your principal, your superintendent, and just making sure that, again, to go back of this theme of communication, just tell me a little bit about those relationships, how important they are, and how you handle the relationships with your school administration.
It is important. I think I heard Coach Calipari say it when he took the Arkansas job, or maybe it was before that. I don't know, but it always stuck with me that, coaches win games, but administration wins championships. And I don't know. I think it's every level. You've got to have support. You've got to have encouragement. You've got to have, somebody that, if you're not doing things the way you should be doing, that they can, have a conversation with you and lead you in the right direction. That's important because we all, I can tell you, all the things we're talking about tonight, we're not perfect. Fayetteville basketball is not perfect. Brad Stamps is not perfect as a leader. And to have people around you that can steer you in a direction or help you is very important. Leadership is lonely. And sometimes I think you can fall into, some dark areas as a leader when you don't feel supported or you don't feel encouraged. The people, your superiors, when they're not checking in on you, or they're not, you can't go to them, or they're absent or distant. It's really a struggle. And so I think it's important to be able to have those relationships that, you can go to them at any point in time about anything, and talk about those things. And then, the day-to-day interaction, all of us coaches in our building, we have supervision duties during the school day. And so our principals, all of them, do the supervision with us. And so we're around them. These are school leaders. We're around them during the day. They hear us talk about not only our team and our team's needs, but also our school and what our school needs. And we want to be interactive. We want that relationship to be so solid that, we're one. We have one high school in Fayetteville, and so the support, our community and all those things, it's important. And so we take it serious, and, we're constantly pushing each other to try to get better in all areas, whether it's athletically or, education or whatever it is. And so it is important, Mike. And I see where Coach Cal, those comments about coaches, we can rally and we can win some games and whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you've got to have great administrators and great people fighting for you, pulling for you, and to win the ultimate prize.
I think it's an extremely underrated part of what makes a high school basketball coaching job a great job, a mediocre job, or a bad job, is what kind of support are you going to have from the administration for your program? And that goes to a lot of the things that you just talked about. There's lots of facets to what support looks like, but I do think that if I was going to give advice to any high school coach before you go and take a job, or as you're going through the interview process, I would do as much possible vetting and question asking of the administration themselves, but also for people who have worked for that administration, even if it's other coaches that are coaching in the athletic department at that school already, somebody who's been there, that's worked with those administrators in a coaching capacity somewhere else. I think if you can get into a situation where the administration is going to be on your side and is going to help you to grow and develop and help your program, you're much more likely, as you said, to be able to build a championship program. Whereas if you end up on the other end of the spectrum and you have an administration that isn't supportive, no matter how great of a coach you are, I know several guys who have been in situations where the administration and just the infrastructure around the program, regardless of how great they were as a coach, made it really, really difficult to have success in certain places. And so I think, again, if I was to give a high school coach some advice, it would be to make sure that you are asking questions of the administration and make sure that you feel comfortable with the amount of support that you're going to get for your program before you take a job.
No, I agree. And, we are fortunate enough to University of Arkansas is right in our backyard. And so we get to go. We have the opportunity every year, Mike, to go speak to college students that want to get into coaching. It's a couple of classes. We go on campus and it's a question answer session, and it's really good. And several of those coaches over the year, or I should say students that were in that class over the years, are now coaches. And we feel like, we can mentor them. And when we go speak to them, we talk about a lot of things. And what you just hit on is so important. When you're going into your first interview or you're going for your first job, that's one of the things at the top of the list, the checklist of, talk to people and find out everything about that school culture, find out from the custodial staff, find out from the receptionist, find out from the registrar, like go to people that not necessarily are in leadership positions, but are of great value to that school, and find out, because you'll find out a lot of things talking to the people who, boots are on the ground. And so I think that's a great point.
Yeah, there's no doubt you'll find out a lot. You talk to those people that you just mentioned; those groups will definitely have stuff for you. All right, let's talk a little basketball now and think about practice planning. Let's start with just overall, general, outside of the season, putting together what you want your program to look like. Maybe even putting together, I don't know if you call it a pacing chart, a curriculum, just kind of how you want your season to develop over time. So let's look at that big picture planning, and then we'll kind of narrow it down to a day-to-day, what it looks like putting together a practice plan for your team on a given day. But let's start with the big picture.
Sure. No, what we, as a staff, we get together and, starting at the first day of school, we really have a plan as to what we want our off-season program to look like. Our season every year doesn't start until around November 15th as far as games go. And so we break it into an off-season and then an in-season. Now, our off-season, we always start the Tuesday following Labor Day as far as the weight room and conditioning and individual skill work. And we will do individual skill work, we'll do weights, and we'll do conditioning starting that Tuesday following Labor Day all the way through till mid-October. Once we get to mid-October, we really start, we continue with the weights and we continue with the conditioning, but it's more of our, getting our install, our offense and our defense and those type of things in. And then, now that we're in season, the weights, we go twice a week. We bring our kids in on our conference games are Tuesday, Friday. Obviously, we're in our conference schedule right now in December where it feels like we're playing every night, but it, as far as travel goes, but it's important for us to continue to hit the weight room. And so we do that on Sunday and Wednesdays. And then, we get into just our week of, our prep, our scout, our film watching and all that stuff, which we can talk about in just a second as far as what our end season looks like. But we're really working on our bodies. Our tryouts every year are in April. Every kid that was on a team the previous year also has to go through a tryout every single year. And so we go through the tryout process in April. And then as soon as the tryout results are posted, we start working on our camp. And our camp is, through April and May. In June, we try to have as many team camps in our state. There's no restrictions on being able to practice or play, during the year, other than 2 weeks. We have a mandated dead period where we can't see our athletes. But we try to play as many games as we can in the month of June with our new team. And then so when we take July off, I'm just a firm believer. A lot of our guys are playing AAU or on the circuit or whatever, but I just believe, Mike, and maybe it's the older I get, I start seeing how important it is that, many times, and we've talked about this in our previous conversations, that we take so much from these kids, the time and the valuable time of being a kid, whether that's, going to the lake or going to a pool or being able to, to go play golf or family vacations or whatever that is. I feel like we're pulling in at them in so many ways and so many different directions that I think it's important to give them time. I know I need time. I need time with my wife and my kids and grandson to be able to, step away, to renew and to before we come back in August and are at it again. And so we give July off, but then, we get started again. So that's kind of what our year looks like. We can specifically talk about, practice planning in season, which is what we're doing. That's where we're at the current moment for sure.
All right, 2 things about what you just said. One, I think the idea of refreshing, right, and being able to step away and then step back to basketball. It's one of the things that when I talk, especially to college coaches at the Division I level, when I look at the amount of time that their kids spend on campus now with the rules the way that they are. And then I think about my experience as a Division I basketball player a long time ago, but our season would end and we'd get a workout, be 2 or 3 pages, and hey, you leave campus and we'll see you back here in August. And I wasn't having the same amount of contact with the coaching staff that players are having now. And I always just try to go back to my thought process as a 18, 19-year-old college basketball player and how grinding it would have been to see the same coaching staff, hear the same voices nonstop throughout the year. You needed an opportunity to step away to be able to then come back fresh and ready to go and have some enthusiasm. And I can't remember who told me this, Brad, but at one point somebody said to me, you have to be away from something in order to miss it, to sort of re-energize yourself. And that always stuck with me, that so often we just are like, we got to do it every day. We got to do it every day. We got to do it every day. But there's something to be said for, let's walk away for whether it's a day, a week, a month, and we can come back to it. And even to do it again, that doesn't mean that your players aren't touching a basketball in July. It just means they're not touching a basketball in July with you and your coaching staff and in that environment. And so that allows them to kind of develop, again, a desire to come back to that. And I think that's really an important point, is just the ability to refresh, I think, is sometimes overlooked at every level of the sport. You can go down to youth basketball, you can talk about high school basketball, you can talk about college basketball. I think that there's probably a bigger need for that refresh than what we think, right? So that's number one. And then the second thing I wanted to ask you is, and we talked about this a little bit before we formally pushed play on the podcast, but just every year as a high school coach, it's not like being in college where you're recruiting a bunch of players to your system, right, every year. So you have a different set of personnel year to year. And clearly, as you said, you have a way that you want to play, right? There's a philosophy that you have as a basketball coach, but sometimes your personnel dictates that you tweak it slightly this way, and sometimes you tweak it slightly that way. So how do you, as a coaching staff and you as a head coach, when do you go through the thought process of, you talked about having the tryouts in April and kind of putting together the new team and then trying to get as many games in as you can during that early period in June when you're with your guys. How do you start to develop how you want to play for a given season? What does that process look like as you look at your new personnel?
No, and that's to be completely frank with you or real with you. That goes on even throughout your non-conference,
Right.
because of so many reasons. For us, from year to year, yes, it varies based on what you have, who you have, as far as size, no size, athleticism, maybe not necessarily as athletic, whatever that is. Our DNA at Fayetteville High School has always been, we're going to guard you in a half court, in man-to-man defense. And, that we hang our hat on that. We want to be the best defensive team. And so, that's always been there. That doesn't mean that we won't come out in a zone press, or we won't come out and play some zone defense, because I think you have to be able to do several things as far as that goes, depending on who you're playing and the scout and all those things. But offensively, we want to play fast, and we want to play fast in transition. We want to rebound it, and we want to push and put the defense back on their heels. But year to year, you have different strengths as far as your personnel goes. Last year, group undersized, but we shot it really well. We set 2 school records during the year with 3-point attempts. We wanted to push in transition and then find the first available good shot that we could find from the perimeter. This year, we have the luxury of having 2 6'8s, a 6'8 senior, and a 6'8 sophomore. We play them together. And so it'd be crazy for us to just be set in our ways, to be, stubborn and say, no, this is the way we've always done it. Let's stick with this, when, quite honestly, this group couldn't play the way we played last year and be successful. And so we're always challenging ourselves as a staff of finding new ways, have a growth mindset of what is the best way this group is going to be successful. When I say it changes throughout a season, we just lost a young man that had size, that as a starter, who tore his ACL a couple of weeks ago. And so now our bench players, or our guys that are coming off the bench, don't have that kind of size. And so maybe we do a little different when that group and that rotation is in. Maybe we play a little differently than we have before, or we don't have 2 bigs in, or whatever it is. So, but yeah, it's a constant. It's for us, it's pushing, each other to finding new ways to do things. But yeah, we like our group. We like to be able to play fast, but also play through our big guys with some high-low and some different things, because they're really good at those type of things. So yeah, it's you raise a great point. And every year, we don't have the luxury of going out and saying, hey, we need a point guard, let's go find one. It doesn't work that way. And so whatever you're dealt with, you have to be creative and find a way that you're going to be successful. That takes time. It is important that, when we get our guys and after our tryouts, to start working with them in individual skills and working with them to get ready for June, to get a head start. We played 12 to 16 games with our new group before we ever get started in school. And those times are important. And we've been criticized maybe a few times of, not having our entire install in and looking like we will in November and December, and that's fine. Really, we're trying to see who's going to compete and, see who, we can really trust and rely on as far as some things there. And so it's ever changing for sure.
Yeah, adaptability, right? Looking at your team and seeing what you need. And again, that can be season to season, that could be month to month, that could be week to week, and that can obviously be day to day. And then you throw injuries in there, and all of a sudden, boom, you got to really adapt to something that you weren't anticipating in any way, shape, or form. And so I think the best coaches, right? You have your philosophy, you have your way that you like to play, you have your principles that everything that you do is based upon, and then you take that center, and then you see what you have around that to be able to make it mix and match to fit into what your to what your philosophy is. And like I said, that can vary dramatically from season to season and week to week, month to month, day to day. And again, the best coaches are able to adapt to whatever the circumstances and personnel and figure out ways to make it work. That's part of the growth mindset that you talked about, right? You're just trying to grow and improve and get better as a coach and help your team to be successful and not be stubborn and stuck in your ways. Tell me about the day-to-day practice planning and what that looks like, both in terms of how do you do it? So are you sitting down together as a staff and discussing it and putting it together? Are you writing it first and then sharing it with the staff? So kind of the process, but then also what does that practice plan look like? Is there a standard sort of rhythm where you're always defense first, then offense, then skill development, or just how does it roll together? So the process and then the actual result of what you create from a practice planning standpoint day to day.
Yeah, that's the war room, as we call it. Our staff gathers every single morning together before the school day starts. We all have, kind of an area where all of our offices are. And so we have a whiteboard, and we literally we'll stand at the whiteboard and we'll be around that whiteboard and we'll discuss whatever we want to emphasize that specific day in season, where we write our thoughts of, okay, well, we need to work on, our help side defense. We need to work on our tags. We need to work on our ball screen coverages. We need to, whatever that looks like, we'll write that on the board. Then offensively, we'll talk about reads or, maybe it's an install, maybe it's a new baseline out of bounds or a sideline out of bounds. And so we write our topics or the things that we really want to get accomplished that day, and then we break it down. We do have a practice plan. That's a template that we use every single day, but it starts with the whiteboard of, we write the times. Our kids get out of class at 3:15. We start practice at 3:30 every day. And so we start with that 3:30 up there on the board, and whatever our end time is that day, it's at the bottom. And then we fill, and it changes from day to day as far as, we don't always do offense first, defense last, or whatever. We just try to, among the group, figure out what's important for that day, what we need to get out of that day, and then we devise a plan. We always want to make sure we have skill work within a practice. I think that's important to work on skills and individual skills every day. I've got great skill coaches, so we do a post perimeter split where we'll have 2 coaches on one end with our bigs, 2 coaches with our guards on it. We try to do this every day. And it could be our offensive actions on both ends, where we're spending time 10 to 12 minutes, within a practice of just working on some basic skills of our offense. Sometimes it may just be getting shots up within our offense and those type of things, but they're getting skill work every day. We have a component where we always want to compete. Kids want to compete. And so we live by it's living by the numbers for us, and we keep track of what our goals are in 4 or 5 different, I would say, drill work that we do, whether it's fast break layups, whether it's 5-ball shooting, razorback passing, all those things. And we keep a number, and we try to beat that number every day, or there's a consequence. And so they love it. They look forward to it. They try to beat it every day. And we try to do that somewhere towards the front of practice after we stretch and get going, just to kick off practice the right way of, okay, we got to compete. Here we are. We're going to beat a number. And then we get into our team sessions and those type of things. But it all starts on that whiteboard every day. I'm not saying that, we're not at home at night writing down a few notes and then sharing them through a group text, our Purple Dog Coaches group thread, because that happens every night where somebody has an idea and, hey, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to see this tomorrow. And then many times, Mike, it's seeing different personnel groups, where we're sharing those of, hey, I'd like to see so-and-so play with this group today. And so that's the fun part. of trying to craft it, put it together, and then execute it. And we truly, we've got 4 managers, and our managers, they have a practice plan every single day. It's scripted of each session is 5, 10, 15, whatever it is, minutes. And so that clock, they're on the clock, they're following the practice plan. And so we're just instructing the practice as it goes. And it's pretty efficient. It's also, there's no wasted time. There's no wasted reps. And we move from one skill or one drill or whatever pretty quickly based on what our practice script is.
What's your process for evaluating a practice once it's over? You talked a little bit about, hey, we go home and each coach kind of is thinking through it, which again, we all do, right? And then sharing ideas back and forth. But do you have any kind of formal way that you go through and kind of review practice, or what's your process for going through a practice and thinking about how effective it was?
Yeah, we film. We have Huddle Focus, and it's a camera in our gym that we turn on every day during our time. And our assistant coaches do a great job. We watch practices. We go back and we clip our practices and show good and bad clips. And we watch a lot of film as a basketball team, and whether it's our scout of our opponent, which we can get into in a minute as far as what the scout looks like and those type of things, scouting your opponent. But we spend a lot of time reflecting, and you reflect by watching. And so we show our players, you say you were running the outside lane and, you're a sniper, you're supposed to get to that corner. Well, you stopped at the 3-point line. You didn't make it to the corner. Why? And so we're asking those questions and we're getting feedback, and those film sessions are, we always tell them, like, we're safe in here, and our job is to, give you constructive criticism to make our basketball team better. When you see it, and my coach used to tell me this, and our players, I'm sure, get tired of me saying it, but the eye in the sky don't lie. And so, film doesn't lie, and it shows things that sometimes it's a valuable tool for them to see themselves and to see things that maybe they thought they were doing that they didn't. But it's not always criticism. We show this was a great job by, you setting the screen and you slipping the screen or whatever it is. It's the little detailed things that we spend time on as far as our practices go.
I think film, especially at the high school level, is so underrated in terms of not just team development, but I think individual player development and understanding what it takes to be a smart basketball player and developing an IQ. And I've discovered this with two of my kids that I'll watch film of their games with them and try to help them to pick up things. And as you said, you do see things on the film that your perception of what you think you saw, or as a player, what you think you did in a certain situation, and then you watch it on film or you watch it with a player and they're talking through it, and what they think they saw or what they think they did doesn't always turn out to be what you see on the film. And there's just so many good opportunities for learning, both, as you said, in a positive and a negative direction, right there. It's important. I think sometimes when I think about old school film sessions that I used to sit through, I would say 95% of it often was negative, right? And looking for the mistakes that players made. And I think we've gotten better as a coaching profession of not just pointing out, hey, here's something that you did wrong, but also pointing out, like, hey, here's a possession where, wow, look at all the good things that we did here. Now we just need to take that and put it on repeat. And there's certainly value in both of those areas. You have to have a balance between them, or if it's all negative, kids tune out really fast. If all you're showing them is the negative plays, it doesn't get the same response as when you share positive things, for sure.
No, I think so. And I think you have to have a thermostat as a coach of when that positive needs to happen and when it doesn't. And the other thing is, Mike, is I think studies show this, but we definitely see this. The longer we're in the film room, maybe the less value it is. And what I mean by that is, you start to lose them. And so we try to I challenge our staff every day when we're doing clips of, okay, let's show, 7 to 10 minutes, and then let's get them out on the floor. Because our film sessions are prior to practice. Our scout is usually prior to a practice. And so we try to make those film sessions and those scouts, really pull back to where we're not in there for long periods of time.
All right, talk to me about the scouting process, what you guys do as a staff, how much information you gather on your opponent, and then how much of that information do you share with players? And is there anything in particular that you find is valuable for the players to know? And then anything in particular that it's important for you guys as a staff to know, but that maybe when you've shared it with the players in the past, it doesn't necessarily have a direct impact, if that question makes any sense.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there to kind of unravel. I think, first of all, when I say, our league or our state, really our region, like if you want to see somebody play, there's access to film. And you're not going to hide anything. You're not going to, and most coaches, they don't mind sharing film anyway, but it's there if you want it. And so our assistants, when I talked about the job description earlier, we're all involved in film exchange to where we have an upcoming opponent who's just played or have played several games or whatever. We try to get as much in our library as possible on that particular team. Once we get that library and we get that film, our staff is split up into who's doing the scout for this particular game. And we do that by our schedule, and they know beforehand who's doing what game. And so that assistant coach will take that particular scout for that game. He will watch several films, and then he'll get clips from each particular film, like I told you before, whether it's baseline, out of bounds, a couple of those, whatever their man-to-man or zone sets are, maybe a couple of, and then obviously we start with personnel. We go over their entire, if they're playing 7 kids, every single kid will have a picture. Our players will see a picture of that kid. They'll also see clips of that particular kid, what their strengths are. And then we go into the stuff themselves, like as baseline, out of bounds, sideline, out of bounds, and their sets, and try to get a feel for what they do, what their strengths are. And our scout always ends with, what are the 3 keys for us to have success? And then we go out and practice, and whatever the scout, we have our assistants that will take a scout team on the other end while we're working on other stuff on the other end. We come together, we'll guard their actions, and we will, rep what the other team's going to do against us offensively as well as defensively. We'll practice against it, and it's really worked well for us. When we don't spend, many days or many hours or minutes in that film room, but it's short, it's sweet. We show them what the important things are, and then we go out and we practice against them, and they get those reps. I think that's important. I think the scout team, most of the time for us, we want all of our guys to at least rep, whether, we're guarding the other team's offense. Many times we won't just be the scout team that's running that. We'll have our top 7 or 8 guys running their actions so they know exactly how they play, what they play, and then we'll defend it. I think there's value there.
You ever send anybody out to scout in person anymore, or is it all just video?
Years ago, yes, Mike, we many scout trips, we did that. But now, it's just video is so, everything's streamed. Everything is, matter of fact, I watched a couple of games last night in my recliner at my house. I had the Razorback game on my big TV. I had my laptop watching a game, and then I had my phone watching another game. And my wife was like, "How are you getting all this?" I was like, "Well, I'm doing the best I can." So, there's always something that you can see and view. And I think, if you can get the important things and then base it down to these are the 3 keys, and then really work on those 3 keys, whatever it is. And our staff does a tremendous job of scouting, whether it's Coach Rose or Coach Brown with the scouts. They do a really good job of preparing our kids and making sure that, we're mentally where we need to be going into an opponent.
We're a long way from the days of driving film to the FedEx box and dropping the VHS tape in to be able to trade film with people. It's always, I think, probably, in all honesty, when I think about the coaching profession back when I was a player and early on in my coaching career, I honestly think that just the accessibility of film might be one of the biggest changes in the coaching profession, just in terms of how that's handled and what it allows you to do as a coach, both with your own team, right? And watching your own team's games and your own team's practices. And then you think about just the ability to scout. And it's almost like you can probably be in danger of, because there's so much film out there when you're preparing for an opponent, it's like, do I cut it off at watching 2 games, at 4 games, at 8 games? There's so much information out there that it's almost possible, I think, to get overloaded, which clearly wasn't a problem in the past when it was so difficult to be able to exchange film and get your hands on film. And as you said, coaches used to like to be secretive with the stuff that they do, and now it doesn't matter. Everybody's willing to share everything because it's all out there. You can't hide anything, even if you wanted to. So it's definitely a different world when it comes to film exchange. I want to jump back to something that you highlighted a little bit earlier when we were talking about the coaching staff and putting together a staff. And you talked about the vertical alignment, right, of your program from varsity to JV to middle school. And then we didn't really hit on the youth program, but let's talk a little bit about how important that is from a public high school standpoint when you start talking about building a program. This is what I always say, Brad, is that you can have winning seasons if you don't have a great program, because maybe you get a group that has a lot of talent in it and they just come and you can coach them up and you can win games. But in order to have a program, you have to have invested in your youth program. You have to have invested in your middle school program so that when you have a down year, right? If you have a good program, if you have a down year, you're probably still going to win more games than you lose because you have systems in place. And even if you have a team or a class or 2 in a row that doesn't have great talent, they still have been developed in the right way and they understand how you want to play. And I always think that's the sign of a great public high school program, is a team that their good years are outstanding and their down years are still, they're going to be tough to play against. They're probably going to win more games than they lose. That to me is a sign of a great high school program. So how do you put together that vertical alignment from your varsity all the way down to your youth program?
No, it's so important. And, we're highly involved in our youth programs. We have a boys and girls club here to where, some of our former players are coaching those younger kids. We do clinics for them. We also have a AAO facility where these kids are getting skill work, but they're also being put on teams and competing against each other. And we have our former players involved there as far as designing practices and trying to do some things. Obviously, to me, it's running plays as 3rd, 4th, and 5th and 6th grader isn't of great importance to us. We want, to be honest, I wish we could go to 3-on-3 year round for our young kids, to where every kid has to touch a ball. You're not putting your biggest kid in a pick and roll stuff in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and 3 kids never touch the basketball. And maybe that's coming. We're going to continue to push that. I think AAO has started doing a 3-on-3 league for older kids. I'd like it to start young age, and we're going to continue to push that. But we're highly involved in that, and we're there at those games after those teams. We're at the tryouts when those teams are picked and chosen. What I really like is we've gone back because our youth leagues now compete against our conference schools on Saturdays or Thursday nights. And so, we have every kid, whether they're at one elementary on one side of the town or one elementary on the other, they're all wearing a Fayetteville jersey that says Fayetteville across it in our colors, which I really like. And they're competing against other schools in our league, but they're representing, Fayetteville. And that's a big deal for us. And then as they progress, to the middle school area, it gets more competitive. And they're playing in the summer. We do clinics. We just got through with a clinic not too long ago for all those coaches of all the youth teams in our district, where they come to our gym, Fayetteville High School's gym. Our players help us. We go through a practice session, showing them, man-to-man defensive principles or different things that are important to us. So they're hearing the same lingo. They're hearing the same verbiage. That vocabulary is the same. It's familiar all the way through from, third grade all the way to the high school. We're a no middle defense. And so they're always hearing, don't allow the ball to the middle of the floor. And so all those things. And then our middle school and our junior high coaches do a really good job of aligning exactly, how we want it. We have a professional development every summer where our 7 through 12 coaches are together. It's a valuable time for us because there's so much planning involved in the next season or the next thing. And we want everybody in the same room, really talking about how we can develop young people, but also just the day-to-day structure of a program and what that means. We have presenters, we have people come and talk to us. We have, like I told you earlier, that the partnership between us and the University of Arkansas is important. When Coach Eric Musselman was there, he had an open door where our staff could walk across the street and watch practice anytime we wanted to. We could stay and ask questions. Now that Coach Cowell's there, he's done the same for us. And so we're always trying to find ways to learn, to try to find something new, whether it's X's and O's or scheme, or whether it's just motivation, leadership, whatever it is. We challenge each other as a staff because we want it to be better. At the end of the day, Mike, we want to create memories of a lifetime for all of our kids and all of our players, but it starts early. And, we call it Purple Pride. We want those kids to value playing for their community and what that means. I'm a product of that. Two of my staff members are products of that. And so we speak about that often, of what it means and the pride it takes to, and you should value playing for your community. And these people are going to come out and watch you because they've been watching Fayetteville basketball for years, and it's important to them. Our former players come back who've played in the program, and they watch and they support. And it's just a big deal for us. And, we're continuously trying to find ways to do things better. But our youth programs are a valuable tool for us. And we're constantly evaluating those kids and getting to watch those kids build relationships like we talked about earlier. And then they come to our games. Well, our kids go to their games, but they come to our games. We have our youth programs involved in our game nights. Sometimes they play at halftime. Sometimes they will be ball boys or ball girls for, our girls program. And so it is a partnership, and it is, something, it's a family and something that we take great pride in.
I think that is extremely critical. When I think about a youth program, there's all kinds of mechanics that go into it, right? And you talked about some of those in terms of aligning the things that you're trying to teach and getting them to hear the terminology and doing the coaches clinics, and all those things are really, really important. And those are what allow you to develop players that have some of those concepts instilled in them from a young age. So when they get to middle school, when they get to JV, when they get to high school and the varsity, that they have those things that are a part of sort of their basketball DNA, because they've been taught it and they've seen it and they've heard it from their coaches since the time they're 7, 8 years old. But I always think that the most important thing, and it's something that in communities that I see that have success from a basketball standpoint, there's that connection that you talked about between the varsity program up here and the third graders down here. And then there's a connection all the way between, because I think about my own experience as a 8, 9, 10-year-old kid. And this is back a long time ago when things were a little different, but the high school players used to coach our teams in city recreation basketball. This is pre-travel, pre-AAU, pre all that stuff. And I often say that the guys that I coached, or the guys that coached me when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I still have relationships today with some of those guys.
Yep.
And then conversely, when I was a high school kid and I was coaching some of those younger kids, I still have relationships with those guys. And so it's just such a strong connection that I remember how important it was to me to go to a high school game when I was in 5th, 6th grade and watch the high school team come out of the bands playing and warming up. And guys, I remember I thought it was so cool, Brad, when guys could slap the backboard on their layup. And I couldn't wait for the day that I could go out there and run out to the pep band and slap the backboard on a layup. And so from the time I'm 8, 9 years old, I always wanted to be like those kids because I knew them and I had interacted with them. And that's so, so valuable in a community to have somebody that is the role model for a kid who's 8, 9 years old, especially, let's face it, right? In the days of high school basketball that we have now, where players at this level are already being recruited, there's private schools, there's this, there's all these different competing factions. To be able to have a kid who's in 3rd or 4th grade go to a varsity game and look and say, someday I want to be like Steve because Steve has been to my practices, he's been to my games, he knows my name. That stuff to me is extremely valuable. And then you can kind of flip it on its head. And how valuable is it for your high school kids to go down and learn how to interact with the players who are younger than them and the coaches who are coaching those teams, and even just saying hello to the parents of those 8, 9, 10-year-olds. All that stuff to me just feeds and builds a basketball community, which again, I think is a super underrated part of what it takes to make a great basketball, again, program, not a great basketball team or a great basketball season, because you can have those without having a great program. But in order to have a great program, you have to have that kind of community connection where younger kids aspire to be those older kids and be a part of their program. And they know who Coach Stamps is, and they want to someday, I want to play for that guy. Like he's been saying hi to me. He's been talking to me since I was 8.
Yeah.
I can't wait someday to be a part of his program. I think that's so underrated.
No, I agree, Mike. And that's one of the things. I didn't even hit on this, but as you're talking, we do a kids camp every summer. It's the first week that school's out. And to be honest, Mike, we over the last 2 years, our numbers have been off the charts. Bigger. Each year has been bigger, to the point where we're thinking about having to have 2 different sessions or 2 different camps now, because we have 3 gyms and all 3 gyms are so full. And we have our players work these kids camps. And I can't tell you how much pride being a Fayetteville kid, a Fayetteville product who went through those kids camps, and now on where I'm at in my career, to stand at that door every single morning at the arena when the parents, many of those parents that I either went to school with that now have kids, or, that are just Fayetteville legacy families walking their kids in for a Fayetteville kids camp and watching our kids, our varsity kids, teach these kids and are around these kids and are mentoring these kids. Like, it truly is one of my favorite things that we do during a school year or even in the summer, is the value of that and the pride that you see. That's something that when I retire someday, that'll be something that I truly miss are those kids camps.
That leads into another topic that you mentioned in our exchange before the podcast, and that's school and community service, right? And part of, again, your players working and with the younger players, providing back to the community, a way for them to give back to a program that has been good to them. But talk about what you do as a head coach to facilitate some of those service opportunities for your players.
Yeah, we believe in that. We believe in serving our community, and we want to give back, and we do so many different things. Every year, we do a few things that we haven't done the year before, and so it's always, and Mike, the biggest thing is as we're doing these events, we're planning these events, we always search for things that we feel like are going to impact our kids. That are going to impact whoever we're doing these community service events for. But at the end of the day, Mike, what I've found out every time we do these are the impact that it's making on our young people and of service and being able to serve and being able to do some things, the gratification they get from that. And so it's twofold. And we want our kids to experience what it means to really go out and serve. And so we try to find opportunities where that's the case. We always do a blessing basket during Thanksgiving where we're working at a local church and our kids are, they're either in the warehouse and they're packing food baskets. They're bringing the inventory out. Cars are pulling in. Our kids are loading these boxes of food into cars so these families can have Thanksgiving meals. There's so much value in that. We do an angel tree every year for different organizations. Every year it's been different for different groups that we feel like, need things. And we try to really hit on necessity items, things that these families may not have that we're blessed to have. And so there's power in that. There's power of giving to somebody who doesn't have something. And we always, at the beginning of the year when I talked about our parent meeting is, I challenge our parents and I give the parents, hey, be involved in this. Give us, if you know of something or a need or whatever it is, let's get our young people out there and let's serve and be involved in that. And so now with our graduation, our new states, our governor, they require that you have a certain amount of community service hours to go along with your graduation requirements. And so, not only is it important and the gratification that you get, the satisfaction you get from being able to serve and what they get out of that, but it's also something that they have to do to be able to, to go along with their degree or their diploma, I should say. And so we're pushing, every day we're trying to find new things, new ways to do that. We try to do 2 every fall, and then we try to do 2 or 3 in the spring when our season ends. And, we're actually doing an angel tree here coming up soon. So our players are always involved in those type of things. School service wide, we try to, if there's we have a great drama department and we try to get our kids involved in that. I was a judge last year at a fashion show in our building. We try to get our players involved in things outside of basketball. We'll travel as groups to go watch our football team or our volleyball or our track or whatever it is. We want to be there for other athletes as well and get outside of our lane and support other people doing other things.
All that is so important. And I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that in the day-to-day, both as a basketball coach, as a basketball player, even as a basketball parent, right? Sometimes it's difficult we get so caught up in the performance of the day or how was practice or did we win or lose this game or how did I play? What's our record? All those things. It's easy to get caught up in that. And sometimes we forget that the biggest lessons and value ultimately that we all get out of sports is that the ball stops bouncing. I don't care if you end up playing 20 years in the NBA. At some point, even LeBron, the ball is going to stop bouncing and he's got the rest of his life to live as a person. And so what do you take away from being a part of a basketball team or a basketball program as a person? And all the things that we've talked about for the last 15 minutes, both in terms of the youth program and the connection there, and then just getting out in the community and getting out in the school. And I reflect back on what you said earlier about just giving kids a chance to be a kid and go to a pool, or again, if you're a basketball player, get to a football game with your friends, or to be able to go and be a part of a fashion show or be a part of a play, or just, again, all the things that impact you in life. Do they theoretically make you a better basketball player? No. But do they make you a better person, which can then make you a better basketball player and a better teammate and all the things that we talk about and want to have an impact as coaches? I think those things are really, really important. And I think, again, if you're having a good program, being able to incorporate that school and community service, I think is invaluable, not just for the kids who are involved and for the whatever charity or group that you're impacting, but it just sets a great tone for what your program's all about. And then I'll take it back to the basketball side of it. You mentioned before we jumped on that you had 7 seniors in your graduating class last year, and 7 of those 9 are playing college basketball currently or on college basketball rosters.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your role as a high school coach and kind of, again, it's a different era in college basketball recruiting with NIL and the portal and everything that goes along with that, and players being recruited out of high school. It's a little bit different, and it's not the same way it was 10 years ago. So just talk to me a little bit about your role as a high school coach in helping to facilitate your players' ability to be recruited and make good decisions in that area.
Yeah, it is important. And, last year's group was special in a lot of ways. And, it starts with conversations with your young people of, do you have college basketball aspirations or dreams? And then once we get that feedback, we really dive into, okay, let's create a portfolio for you. Let's create it with video. Let's create it with, your transcript. Let's create it with different things that you do so that we have something to market you with. And then we have a college day every season. I have fortunate enough to have several relationships in the college coaching, whether it's JUCO, D2, NAIA, Division I, several coaching friends across the country in different places and different, and my staff as well. And so we call those coaches beforehand and say, hey, let's find a date where you can come to our gym, and we actually design a portfolio for all of our guys, and we give those to these coaches as they come. We set them courtside and we put them through a workout. It has their jersey number. It has the summer basketball team they play on. It has their parents' information. It has their contact information. It has their GPA currently. It has their ACT score. So it's really a vital tool for these coaches. They come in, they watch us work out, but then they have something that they can use to recruit our players. During the season, we're in constant contact with these coaches about, how they're playing and those different things. And then, we're always having conversations. Like, I've got seniors right now that one of them, he's had several offers, and, and he's going through that, trying to be patient, and we're trying to push that on him. And it's different now, Mike. It's different. Recruiting's different now for high school seniors because of the transfer portal and because of the different things that are going on. And college coaches tell me all the time it's a different world for them as well. And so getting a kid to understand that, getting a kid's parents to understand that, you may not get what you want right now, but at some point something's going to work out, something's going to happen. So having those tough conversations about that and what that looks like, are important. I think phone calls to parents and just say, hey, here's this particular school really likes your son. They're going to be in our area. They would like to come by and see you, but you can also come up here and visit with them. And then, staying in constant contact, giving feedback, always being able to give information to your young people about, when we go on the road. We just went to a tournament last week where we had a couple coaches saying, hey, we're going to be at your game. And then following up with them afterwards. I think follow-up is big to where the player always knows where they stand. There's no guessing game. I feel like we do a tremendous job in that area of giving kids information they need, giving parents information they need. And then it comes down to making decisions, at some point. And, if a kid wants to play college basketball and he tells us they want to play college basketball, we're going to do everything on our side and our team to make sure that those goals and those dreams happen. At the end of the day, things are going to work out. It just sometimes it takes a little time and a little patience for sure.
Being an advocate for your players, right, and also being a source of education and information for those players and their families. I think that's one of the things that sometimes people take for granted, just how complicated it can be, right? Again, depending on the level and where you're at and what you're trying to make a decision between in terms of different schools and coaches. And obviously for a lot of families, it's the first time that they've gone through that process. And so to be able to lean on someone like yourself and your staff that's gone through it with multiple players kind of gives you a perspective that you can share with those families to be able to help them to make an informed decision, a good decision. And clearly, again, the landscape is ever changing and changing probably more quickly than it has at any point in history. And so to be able to have, as a high school coach, if you're out there and you're coaching high school basketball, you owe it to yourself and to your players to become as educated as you can on the current rules and processes and what's going on so that you can be an advocate for your players and to be able to help them, as you said, if they have goals, if they have dreams. And not every kid does, but for those that do, to be able to do whatever you can to try to help them to find the right fit so that they can go and have a successful basketball career, but also have success academically and fit in socially and make the whole thing just, again, a positive experience and find that proverbial right fit for them. Brad, we have hit on a bunch of things, and we just cruised past an hour and a half, and I feel like we probably have like 20 more topics we could easily hit on. But I think we'll probably leave it there. And before we get out, I want to give you a chance to share, how can people who listen tonight, how can they reach out to you, find out more about what you're doing with your program at Fayetteville? But just share email, social media, website, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Yeah, for sure, Mike. And networking is important. Relationships are important. I always want to talk life and basketball with as many people as possible. So yeah, I think I'd love to share my contact. Social media on X, it's at bstamps22 is my personal, at Faye Bulldogs BB is our basketball X page, as well as Instagram. My staff runs that. I don't. So if you see something posted and you don't agree with it or don't like it, that didn't come from me. And then my email is brad.stamps@fayar, that's FAYAR.net.
Brad, it has been great to have one of the original Hoop Heads back on the pod. I think if I remember correctly, I think you were number 7. So for people who are out there listening, if you go back and listen to Brad's original episode to get his backstory, please don't judge me on my ability to conduct a podcast interview back in the day. Hopefully I'm a little bit better after 1,000 some reps with that. So please don't judge me if you go back and listen to Brad's original episode. But nonetheless, consider you one of the original Hoop Heads. Really blessed to have you on for a third time. So thank you to Brad, and thank you to everyone out there for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoop Heads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.